And another thing I think was time. I didn't anticipate all of the time that it would take to make certain things. So it's like you have a thing like, okay, this is going to take me about like X amount of time to do. But I've learned that you have to actually expect more time out of each task.
Welcome back to another episode of the Breadwinner Podcast. I'm your host, Caroline, and today's episode is going to be one that I am so excited about. I'm here with Elizabeth, and recently I wanted to have a conversation about niching down with a specific cultural type of bread. And Elizabeth messaged me right as that thought was on my radar, and it was just serendipitous and perfect. I was like, hey, come talk to us about this. So I am so excited that you're here. Do you want to jump in and introduce yourself? Give us a little bit of a big picture of what brought you here and into the microbakery world?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Elizabeth, and I run Borges Family Homestead, which is a sourdough and Portuguese bakery. We're located in Northern California, but more closer to the Oregon border, and we're on the coast, very rural area. And I wanted to have this conversation with you because I think it's important to have a certain niche and really niching down and finding what would really benefit your community and what will allow you to find a good customer base and to really stand out from your competitors in the area.
Mm. I love that. And I think that is really the key because there are so many bakers and more bakers joining all the time. And so finding a way to differentiate yourself, and in a case like yours, pulling it to your heritage, I think that's so beautiful. So tell me the background of Borges Family Homestead. How did you get started?
Yeah. So I have been baking for many years. My parents did not bake at all. And actually, my grandmother didn't bake at all, to tell the honest truth. And so I have always loved food and I've always loved to experiment in the kitchen from a very young age. And so when I got married, I wanted to be able to be that housewife that would make meals from scratch and learn how to bake bread. And my husband's from Portugal and my family is Portuguese. And more specifically, both of our families come from the Azores, which is a group of islands in the middle of the Atlantic that belong to Portugal. And it's very old school, very like traditional. Of course, it's like more modern nowadays, but they're behind. They're about like almost like 15 to 20 years behind everywhere else, like on the continent. I think it's one thing is that's interesting to me is my great grandmothers actually had a pretty big history in baking in their villages and in their towns in Portugal. So my great grandma on my mom's side, she was known as like the best baker in the village, and like people always praised her breads. And then my great grandma on my dad's side, and she's actually the one who raised my dad. She actually ran a microbakery out of her home in Portugal. She baked bread for the restaurants in their town. So I was like different. Like I never would think of that. They didn't really have like huge bakeries.
Mhm.
Then most people baked bread at home. So even my husband's, his mom, he's one of seven kids, and his mom every like week to 2 weeks, like she would bake many loaves of bread. And they didn't have nice gas or electric ovens like we do now or industrial bread ovens. They had the wood fire ovens, the bread ovens from
Wow.
okay. So they would bake many loaves. It would take many hours to get their bread ovens like up to a certain temperature. So I always connect my story and my business back to those traditions. Yes, I'm obviously using modern. It's very like therapeutic for me to be like kneading dough, to be shaping the dough, and it connects me to my culture, and I really love it. It's very nostalgic for me.
I love that. I love that connection and the connection back to the heritage of your great grandmothers on both sides baking. How beautiful.
Yeah.
Did you experience, you said your parents didn't bake, your grandma didn't bake. Did you have any experience with traditional European bread? Any way to understand what it was as you were growing up?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So like where I lived, there wasn't like traditional European bread. We did have one bakery that came about like in the late 80s. So I was like 10, 11 years old when they opened, and they were the closest thing, but it still wasn't exactly like the bread from Portugal. And it wasn't like as typical European bread. Like they did use yeast, to commercial yeast. But my family would go back to Portugal every few years, and I would have traditional European breads. Like bread in Europe, they do not demonize bread like they do here in the US. Bread is a huge staple. They do not look at bread as being unhealthy. Like they have it with almost every single meal. Of course, they're not having necessarily for one person, one whole loaf of bread in each meal. It's very much like a staple as just as you have like your fork and knife, like you have a piece of bread to go along. And I love that it's just such a huge cultural representation of the food world in Europe. And so going back to Portugal, they have different types of traditional breads. They have these bread rolls called sausage that is really good for sandwiches. And I do offer those on occasion. Here out of my microbakery, they have traditionally leavened bread, but they do it a little bit differently than making a sourdough starter like we do here. A lot of places have done for me. And so what they would do is they would have their bulk dough, right? So then before or as they're shaping it, they would reserve some of that dough and put it aside. So it is like a starter or a levain almost. We would just retain that little piece of dough so that when they bake dough the next time, they have it. So it's almost the same concept, but it's a little bit different. So they would have like Portuguese, which is like your typical, I think that's the closest to like a sourdough loaf that we see nowadays. And then they have homemade, which is bread that is a little bit more of a denser bread, but is really good soups. And it's traditionally served with fish because seafood is a huge thing in Portugal, just being in the ocean. And then I have traveled to various countries in Europe and I studied abroad in France for a semester. Just being exposed to really good bread throughout my life and my childhood is part of the reason what brought me here to create this business. It's called Borges Family Homestead because we also have animals that we raise and it's more of a hobby than a business. So my husband has goats and I do this is like another side of the business. Like we make goat milk soap and lotions, but more for just. But I wanted to be able to bring good quality European style bread to my community because I felt like there was a huge lack of that, and people have loved it. They've responded really well. I make Portuguese sweet bread, which actually is not sourdough. It does use commercial yeast, but it's one of my most popular sellers when I do have it on the menu because there's a lot of Portuguese people up here in my area, but they're like third, fourth, fifth generation. And they remember having that when they were little, like maybe their great grandmothers made it or their grandmothers or the grandmother from the friend next door made it. And they're like, I haven't had this type of bread in 30 years. And this brings me back to those memories. I felt like there was a need up here for that beloved, the sourdough breads, but also the Portuguese baked bread.
I was just going to ask that question if there are a lot of Portuguese people in your area or how you realized that this was a need in your community.
Yeah. So, like I said, there's a lot of Portuguese people. They are mostly like third, fourth generation. There's some still first generation Portuguese, like immigrants here too, but there's nothing up here that there's no Portuguese bakery up here. I think the closest one that we have is 5 or 6 hours away.
Wow.
So it's really nice to be able to offer that. Of course, there's so many things I wish I could offer more of, but based off of the cottage food laws, there's certain things I'm very limited to.
When you started your microbakery, did you start off right out the gate with Portuguese food? And do you do some traditional sourdough too, or are you strictly Portuguese? How did you set your?
No, Yeah, I do a mix of both. So I wanted to offer both because I love making sourdough. I just think sourdough is just, it's so cool to me. And almost every time I feed my starter and I see it double or triple, I'm like, this is just so cool. This is so amazing. Like, it's amazing how it's, you just have flour and water and you add it to more flour and water and some salt, and you can have this amazing bread that tastes good and is good for you and is easier to digest. So I knew I wanted to offer sourdough, and I do more than just traditional artisanal loaves. I also do sourdough bagels. I do sourdough cookies, muffins, cinnamon rolls, which are really big because a lot of people who can't have like grocery store bread and bagels, they can have my products because they can tolerate it better and they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm eating like a bagel and I don't feel bloated afterwards. But it was important to me to also mix in the Portuguese breads and sweets as well.
That's so neat. When did you start your bakery?
I actually only started last July, so July 2024. Yeah, so it hasn't been very long, but I had grown pretty quickly.
Did you find as you were getting started that it took time to gain traction since you had like a cultural niche, or what did that look like?
I honestly, like right off the bat, I started getting a really steady influx of orders because no one else up here was offering what I was offering with the Portuguese. Good. And then that kind of opened the door for them to try the sourdough products. And so it didn't take like too long. I was having a pretty steady, I would say about like 10 to 15 orders a week of people ordering a week. And then that's grown throughout the months. But it was pretty successful, pretty far off the bat. But it wasn't just like by luck. I definitely have worked very hard and I'm very present on social media and advertising. So I think sometimes we see other micro bakers who are successful and they're selling out at markets like rather quickly. And you're like, oh, they're just like lucky or they're in a big city, but it's way more like it to work and be consistent and show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. We're going to come back to that because I want to hear more about that journey. But first, I want to go to the beginning back in like July, August, when you were first starting. Did you face any particular challenges or anything that you didn't anticipate when you were first getting started that you learned from or had to overcome?
Yeah, I think just the equipment that I had when I started, I realized that I needed to like take any profits that I was getting and reinvest back into my bakery because in order to grow, like I needed to invest. So for a while, I was just working out of this single oven. And then, so I opened my bakery in July. And then end of August, I actually purchased a double electric oven, which is like the next room over. You can't see it, but yeah, I had to make that purchase and I wasn't ready to buy a bread oven yet. So I've been operating with like three ovens. And another thing I think was time. I didn't anticipate all of the time that it would take to make certain things. So it's like you have a thing like, okay, this is going to take me about like X amount of time to do. But I've learned that you have to actually expect more time out of each task. So for one example, one of the first few weeks that I was open, I offered Portuguese donuts. And I got something like, I don't know, it was like 20 something orders. So I was making like 150 donuts. And so waking up that morning, and it does use yeast, like commercial yeast, and getting all of that together. And I was having big problems because the flour that I had actually was clumping together and I was mixing it dough and I was panicking because I didn't have a huge mixer at the time and I was doing it all by hand and I had to produce 150 donuts. And so that and then frying it, dredging them, and then I was panicking and I had to between flying and everything, like text my customers like, I'm so sorry, it's taking me longer than I expected. Can you please come at this time instead? So it was a little stressful those first few. weeks, like to get into the groove of things and really figure out how much time it would actually take to make.
I think that's a experience that most of us have, underestimating the amount of time and then the packaging and the cooling and all of that.
Yeah.
Have you offered donuts since then? And if so, did you change your system?
I have. That first time I offered donuts, and then I didn't offer them until the fall, which I did pumpkin Portuguese donuts. So I added some pumpkin puree into it. And that was like in October. And then I recently offered them again last month around like Mardi Gras time. So we celebrate it as Carnaval. So it's very traditional to have these donuts right before Lent. And like a lot of places in Europe or even around the world, food kind of revolves around different holidays and whatnot. So I wanted to offer it for right before Lent, and I'm glad I did. But almost every time I make them, I'm like, I'm not going to make this again.
That's so funny. I relate to that. Do you have a larger mixer now? I see the Bosch behind you, but did you invest in a larger mixer too?
Yeah. So I do have an Estella 30 quart as well,
Okay.
but it doesn't like, I don't like to do those donut doughs in there because it's more of a wetter type of dough. So it's a really big pain to clean and take the dough out. So I usually so I have like my KitchenAid and a Bosch. So I will do it in smaller batches and then just add it to my big bulky bin or whatever. So there's definitely like better systems in place now.
Yeah, it's a labor of love, it sounds like.
For sure.
That, yeah, sounds like just a learning curve that so many people can relate to. I want to circle back a little bit and more about niching down and then hear more about your marketing strategy. But I've seen a couple of people locally do this really well where they just really focus on a cultural food. And like I mentioned, I wanted to have a conversation about this. You said you really gained traction pretty quickly. Do you attribute that to offering the specialty products?
I definitely think so. I think if I was just a sourdough or offering just sourdough products, I think eventually like I would have gotten a good customer base, but I really think offering both just elevated it in a much quicker way because they saw, okay, I'm offering Portuguese sweet bread that week. And then they saw the rest of my menu. Like, oh, I'm going to try her sourdough bagels too. So I think having that aspect of niching down and having Portuguese baked goods as well definitely helped me gain momentum and a customer base quicker than maybe like your.
That makes sense. I'm curious, do you think, and this might be anecdotal, but for someone who maybe we'll use Portuguese as the example, has that heritage but doesn't live in an area with a lot of that population, do you think they would face different challenges? Or do you have any insights on what if they would still see similar success?
I think they would still see similar success because to tell the honest truth, like I offer Portuguese baked goods, but I would say based on my customer base, maybe only 5 to 10% of my customers are actually Portuguese. A lot of it is people that they've never had Portuguese products or baked goods before and they want to try it. Like it's something different, something that they've never seen up here in this area. Or like I said before, it's someone who like 30 years ago had a neighbor whose grandmother was Portuguese and baked this. I think that it definitely can be very successful. Like you do not have to have that people of that culture living in your area to necessarily be your customer. And I'm going to be 100% real here. I do not market to Portuguese people.
Okay.
I am probably a younger crowd, like people who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s who recognize like good quality products and they want to pay a certain amount for it. They aren't looking for just like $1.50, $2 loaves at the grocery store. So it is 100% possible that if you want to offer a particular type of cultural baked good, you can still be wildly successful even with those people.
So good. Is there an educational component or do you Americanize the names of the products to make them understandable or anything like that?
I do. Like, for example, I do these round, it looks like an O shaped cookies called, there's two different names for it in Portugal, either depending on where you are or Swedish. And so if I put that on my menu, people are going to be like, what is that? I don't know. So I named them Portuguese tea cookies. Yeah. So like almost everything that is Portuguese, I will put like what they are in English. Like my sweet bread, I don't call it massa salada. I call it Portuguese sweet bread.
I wonder, I think I asked that because I spoke with someone not long ago who wasn't selling a product that had a name from a different language. And it was like, I think maybe people don't know what it is. If you describe it as Danish donuts, as this example, it might click a little and make more sense to people. But then maybe put the name in parentheses. Do you like put the actual name in the description too? The Portuguese name?
I do most of the time. And when I release my menus, like 9 times out of 10, like I will have the name of the product and then underneath I will have a description of what it is. So like I'll have Portuguese tea cookies, like a perfect, lightly sweet, buttery cookie that is perfect for dunking in coffee and tea that is very traditional in Portugal. Yeah, because and I'm not calling people stupid, but you really need to paint a picture for people. You have to give these descriptions and give them like an experience before they even click to buy it or to order it. Like they want to know.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And that's probably one of the keys to success if you're offering something that people aren't really familiar with, is just helping them connect it with something that they maybe do understand and get excited about it. If you were talking with someone who maybe they don't have a really clear niche like Portuguese food, do you have any advice
Sure.
for someone who's struggling to figure out how to differentiate themselves?
Yeah. And I feel like really take what you're passionate about. Like, what is your favorite thing to make? And focus on that and talk about it very frequently. Because the last thing that you want to do is be making something that you are dreading to make. And so taking something that you love, talking about it very frequently, telling them why they should buy it, and really marketing it so that people want to buy it and have that sense of urgency that it's like an exclusive type of thing. But focusing on what you love to do. For example, I love making sourdough loaves, and I think everyone deserves to have good bread, like I've said before. And I have really been talking about why sourdough is good for you, why you should buy it instead of the grocery store type of bread. And because I talk about it very frequently, my sales of my sourdough breads have gone up exponential because I'm constantly. So writing what is your like bread and butter, right? And diving into that, talking about it frequently. Don't be afraid to talk about it frequently. Don't feel like people need to hear that constant reminder of your products because most of the time they're not seeing every single post of yours or they're not seeing all of your stories. So don't be afraid to talk about it a lot.
That's so true. I'm glad you brought that up. I think a lot of times we feel like I shared about this last week or last month, so they don't need or want to hear it again. But you're so right. Our feeds move so fast. And the chances of other people like keeping track of what they've seen from us or getting annoyed that they've seen it already a week or a month ago are very slim. So you're so right. We need to be repetitive and continually share the products that we're marketing and educate about it. So I want to go back to what you talked about before with your messaging. You said you put so much work into your messaging, your marketing online. And I'd love to hear more about what that looks like for you. So on like a weekly basis, what is your marketing strategy?
So I post very consistently. So I have a business page on Instagram and it connects directly to my business page on Facebook. So when I post on Instagram, it automatically posts to Facebook, which is really nice so that you're not having to post two different locations. So I am posting on average about 6 to 7 times a week. So almost every single day, I'm posting new content on my feed. And that can be anything where, like, I'm talking about my story a little bit, like my mission, or I'm posting my menu for the week, or I'm posting, like, I'm focusing on a particular product. Um, you know, getting those like close ups of the food and like really enticing people to buy your products. Also like behind the scenes. So people really like seeing how am I living my life as a microbaker? Like what is my process? I recently did a series of like the how to make a traditional sourdough loaf, like beginning to end, from like feeding your starter to the very end baking. And my customers, I mean, they're most likely not ever going to do this, but they really liked to see the process of the baking, what it really takes. And it also lets people, if you want to just do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Monday through Friday and take the weekends off, like that's okay. But I think kind of having like a consistent posting schedule is important. So your customers know that like every Monday you're posting your menu for a Saturday. So having that consistency is important, no matter like how much you're actually posting. And then what was your second question? I'm sorry.
Do you have like some structure or a plan that helps you know what to post so you're not just like scrambling trying to figure out what to post each day?
Yeah. So my profile or what page on Instagram follows a certain kind of pattern. So it may be like this is too much for a lot of people, but I'm a very visual person. And I have like one column that's is like a picture of me. So it's either, picture of me posing with bread or whatever, or it's me like a still photo of me doing something. And then the other column is like my food column. So it's like a close up or a far away picture of like my wrap of bread. Cool. And then the last column is like a Canva cover photo, for example. So I can know like what I'm going to be posting based on just how my mood is. And that it can be annoying. Oh, I have to do like a food picture today, but it also helps plan in the future.
I like that. So people
A little-
can take that and adjust it how it's just fits them, but having some sort of system, some sort of like plan and structure probably keeps you from just getting stuck and spinning your wheels because you just know like today's food picture day, today's Canva cover photo day, implementing some sort of system to help support you in your consistency. I love that. If you were talking to someone who is getting started in their bakery, in their marketing, is there a key bit of advice that you would share with them in the very beginning?
yeah. Um, First, I think they really need to master their products. Of course, like we're always learning as we go. Like I'm not the best baker there is, like definitely not. But I think you really need to know how to make your products well, consistently before you actually open doors. I see a lot of people starting a business or posting and their breads are like severely under fermented. And like they maybe just started baking sourdough like 2 months prior. So it's like I understand like the hype and I feel like it's trendy right now, like to romanticize being a micro baker. And it's a lot of work, as you and I both know, and all of our listeners now, but are your listeners now. And then second of all, researching your states or your region's laws. Like, do not just start selling. Like, you want to make sure that you're getting the proper license and permitting, or doing a food handlers course or whatever. Make sure you have all of your ducks in a row before you start selling. Like, it took me a few months to actually get everything together and legal before I actually announced that like the bakery is open.
Mhm. That's so good. It's been a long time since I've shared an episode about that. So I'm glad you brought it back around because that is so important. And every state is different. Some states make it really simple to get up and running. And some states have more hoops to jump through to apply for things like that. So no matter where you're listening, a Google search or even going into ChatGPT and asking for research into your specific state or province, wherever you are.
One of the hardest states. So I'm in California. And so a lot of regulations and you know, fees to pay and regulations. It just, there's a lot, but just making sure you do your homework and do it properly.
Definitely. I'm so glad you brought that up. And then the importance of educating yourself in the art and science of baking too is
Yeah.
I definitely probably started selling my bread too early and threw myself into self-educating and honing it, and I'm still always learning. So if you start too early, no worries, just continue to learn. But I'm glad you said that too, because I think that's really important to really establish that consistency in order to build trust with your customers.
Yeah, definitely. And when I first started, there was a few batches that were under fermented. I mean, it happens especially as the seasons change, but you don't want to just start like, okay, I just started baking sourdough a month ago and I'm starting a business right now. Like, take it easy, do a lot of like experimentation, um, practice with bulk baking and giving out loaves to friends and family. Like that's where I started. Like for like over a year, I would say. Actually longer. Like I've been giving out baked goods for many years to friends and family. So then give their opinions, you know?
Yeah, that's such a good place to start. When you were first starting, what did it look like as you were navigating like pricing and profitability? Is there anything that you wish you had known in that first season?
Well, I actually used an online calculator. I think it's Cake Plus or Cake Cal Cake, I think it's cakeplus.com, I want to say. Um, you can Google search it and find it very easily. But I didn't want to just come up with some random number. So I would put my ingredients in, the price of it, my packaging, how much I wanted to pay myself an hour, and any other costs that you might have. And you put all those calculations in, and it comes up with a price that you should charge your baked goods. So um, I did that, but I also like sometimes saw that and I was like, oh, that seems like too high. There's no way like someone would pay that amount for a dozen cookies. So I think some of my products I started off too low. And I didn't want to necessarily raise them like right off the bat because I mean I was just also starting out, but as time has gone on, I raised cookies like $2, for example. Bagels, when I hit a year in business, like I'm raising my prices in bagels. Because it may not have a lot of different ingredients in it that are expensive, but they're very time consuming. I didn't really factor that into my costs of pricing certain items. So um, really thinking about that and making sure you don't, you know, kick yourself in the butt afterwards. Like, why did I price that so low?
Totally. That's such good advice. It's really easy to undercut our own labor, undervalue that. But if you're underpricing, that's a recipe for burnout. So good. If you could go back to when you're first starting, is there something you wish you knew?
Right? I wish I could have gone back and tell myself like it's gonna be fine. Like I was very stressed in the beginning. And because I was, you know, having all of these permits come through and like the county was taking a long time to get back to me. And I was very much on edge. And like, if I could just tell myself it's going to be fine, like everything happens for a reason. And the timing happens when it's meant to happen. So that's what I would tell myself, that to just chill out a little bit.
That's so good. You can take your time. It doesn't have to be a
Yeah.
rush to 100 loaves at a time.
Also, when I first started, my menus were way too big. Like I wasn't able to offer everything. Like I wouldn't offer like Portuguese breads and cookies and sourdough. And so like I've learned now to reduce my menu a little bit. And like, for example, I only do Portuguese sweet bread once a month now. And people know that it's usually almost always the first week of the month that I offer sweet bread. And I think that helps because it also kind of creates like a sense of urgency or like there's a limited amount or time that you can have this. So I wish I would have, known that.
That is so good. I was going to ask you about that actually, about what your menu looks like. And if you rotate things or like on a given week, how many products do you offer?
So I always have like 2 to 3 types of sourdough breads. And then I have usually bagels almost every single week. I try to do my bagels that it's all the same dough, but then there's different toppings. So I will have one that's a cheese topping or everything bagel or combination pack. And then I will offer 1 to 2 different sourdough sweets. So like, or 2 to 3 actually. So like a cookie, cinnamon rolls, and then like the muffin of the month. So that's a new thing I'm doing this year. So every month I have a different flavor sourdough muffin. And then once in a while I'll throw in like Portuguese cookies and then I will have like, my sweet bread once a month.
That's so fun. I love the muffin of the
Yep.
month idea.
Yeah, I think it's cool because it's like people want to try out like, oh, what's the muffin of the month? So, or like this week, for example, is last week you can order the muffin of the month. So if you haven't ordered it yet, now's your chance to try because I don't know when I'm ever going to offer it again, probably not until next year.
Hmm.
So it's a, also like it, it makes you excited to have new things, to make new things, and so you don't get bored of the same. Like particularly I can never get bored of making salad always.
That's so good. I love that. And I feel like muffins are, for me, they're an easier thing to experiment with and a little less labor intensive too. So they're one of the sweets that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
I I've
Same.
got wheels turning thinking about how I can do a something of the month. How fun. So in your business right now, what is your big focus? Or are you in a growth season or kind of stable? What does it look like in this current season?
I'm definitely in the growth season. So so in California, there's 2 different types of food cottage permits. There's a food cottage A where you sell directly to the consumer, or you can do a food cottage B where you can sell to the consumer and also do wholesale. So I started off with just A and I wasn't interested in doing wholesale at all. But then I had a coffee shop approach me and I was like, like I wonder, like this could be interesting. And so I looked into it. I resubmitted my application. I had to do a whole new application. And I now have a wholesale permit as well. And that has opened up the door because customers of the coffee shop, like they might, get a muffin or a bagel or a cookie or whatever. And then they find me like, oh, this person's the one who's making this. And they go to my website and they order from me. So I've gotten customers that way. And so now I'm in 3 different locations. And this was just since January. So my sales have like quadrupled since January, since starting wholesale.
That's amazing.
And it's like if you want to grow, don't be afraid of looking into if you can wholesale. There is sometimes certain places that you do take a cut. Like one place is 20%, another place is like 10%. But I think it's worth it if you want to get your name out there. Of course, you still want it to be profitable, but wholesale has really opened the door for me for people to know about my business. So I'm in a season of growth and I'm currently looking for a baking assistant because lately I've been working like 7 days a week and it's a lot. So I recognize that I need some help.
Yeah, that is so exciting. Do you want to add more wholesale accounts or does this feel like a good amount right now?
Right now, this is why like my
Yeah.
capacity. But as I potentially hire someone, I could, maybe get another coffee shop if I'm doing like similar products. It's like when you're bulking baking, of course, it does add more time, but like if you're making the same items, it is more worthwhile. And ultimately, I want to open a brick and mortar. That is my dream. I think that it would do very well here, especially with Portuguese stuff, because I would be able to offer so much more. Like a lot of Portuguese desserts are custard based, which I can't do now in my type of setting. But with the brick and mortar and working out of a commercial kitchen, I would be able to do that. And so that is my goal. So I'm working and hustling with that dream.
That's so exciting. I love a big dream. Do you see it? What if you just like paint your brush? What does your brick and mortar look like?
Well, I would offer sourdough breads, of course. And then I would still do bagels, different sourdough type of pastries, and then also do Portuguese breads and Portuguese pastries. Um, Also having like some take and go type of options for lunch, like making like simple sandwiches out of baguettes. That people can, I don't want to have like a sandwich counter where people are having to have an employee designated to making sandwiches, but like having prepared already sandwiches that you can just take and go, and then having also coffee and tea available. So it's like a place that people can come and pick up their loaf of bread that they're going to have for dinner with their family, or they can go there with their friends and have a cup of coffee and a pastry. So that's kind of my vision.
Love it. This year is teaching me that visions like that sometimes come around sooner than you think they will. So I'm excited to see how that takes shape. Do you have a timeline of when you hope to open?
Um, Originally I said like 3 to 5 years, but I think it's going to be more like 2 to 3
How
years, to
exciting.
tell the honest truth, just because um, it's a lot of work and a lot of money that goes into opening a brick and mortar. But I also want to get to a spot someday where I can reclaim my home. And I know for a lot of people, that is like the opposite of why they run a microbakery. Like they want to keep it at home and like have that flexibility. But I'm the type of person that if I'm home, if there's something that I can do in my bakery, I'm going to do that. So finding a separate spot where this is my work, and then when I'm home, like this is my home, um, is very important to me. So I think it's going to be sooner than 3 to 5 years, but we have a lot of, funds to think about and all of that.
Yeah, totally. That's so exciting. I'm excited to follow along and maybe bring you on for a follow up in a couple of years and see how it's going. I also like that microbakers are not one size fits all. Uh, the episode that I just recorded right before you was with someone who is keeping her bakery very small and she wants to stay in her home and she knows exactly kind of her capacity to keep the joy in it. And she does not want to be on large scale. And so for listeners, I like bringing in all of the perspectives and the talking about microbakery, small scale bakeries, home based, but also I think we'll be bringing in more of the conversations of what it could look like to go in the commercial direction too. And keeping it small scale and just serving the community in a really intentional way. So I can't wait to hear how that takes shape for you. Um, as we sort of start to wind down, I love to throw a couple of rapid fire questions at you. If you're ready, just a
Okay,
couple of fun, like whatever comes to your mind first.
sure.
What is your favorite thing to bake? Particularly like if you're overwhelmed and need like a comfort food.
Okay. Honestly, a good old traditional sourdough loaf.
Yeah, same. I'm about to mix up a half whole wheat loaf and I am so excited. That's just like the family comfort bread.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. What is one tool in your bakery that you really can't live without? besides?
I would say my Estella mixer when because I was dealing with a lot of carpal tunnel before I got that bad boy, and I do not have the carpal tunnel symptoms anymore. Thank goodness. Yeah.
Love it. That's so good. Yes, that is huge for caring for our body. When you don't feel like cooking or on a busy bake day, what's your go-to meal?
Um, probably just like some like avocado toast with the sourdough and frying up some eggs. We have chickens and ducks, so just having some eggs and maybe like some fruit or like some tomatoes or whatever type of veggie on the side. Very quick, but still like nutrient dense.
Perfect. Nourishing, comforting, perfect. We do breakfast for dinner. Very similar when I
Mhm.
don't feel like cooking anything. Fry up some eggs and
Mhm.
throw it on some toast or some pancakes. Love it.
Mhm.
Well, are there any final thoughts? Anything that you maybe wanted to say and didn't get to, or one word of encouragement to kind of close on?
Yeah. I feel like I talked about making sure that you were doing the proper steps to open up your bakery legally, but I also don't want people to be afraid to do it. So, like, if it's really like your passion and you want to do it, do not let fear hold you back. Um, Fear held me back in a lot of aspects of my life. And this is the first time that I actually put myself out there and was successful at it. And it's because I decided to not. So
Oh,
just go for it.
that is such a good way to
It's
close it up. And I'm so glad you brought that back around because I do think we tend to limit ourselves a little bit and get so overwhelmed or fearful of. Sometimes it's hard to even articulate what we're scared of, but just let that fear of failure or judgment or anything hold you back. I'm so glad you ended on that note. For people who want to connect with you and kind of follow along and maybe get inspired and see your beautiful grid, um, get inspired by your consistency too, where can they find you online?
yeah. So I'm on Instagram and Facebook. It's Borges Family Homestead. Um, yeah, all underscore.
Perfect. I will put that down in the show notes so people can find you. And as always, to the listeners, if you resonated with something that Elizabeth shared, if you have an idea, if you had a light bulb moment on a way that you can niche down in your own community, tag us, take a screenshot of the show, tag Elizabeth, Borges Family Homestead, and tag myself, Caroline Bauer _ sourdough. We would love to see what you resonated with and how you might implement something from this episode's conversation. And if you haven't followed the show yet, make sure you do that so you don't miss an episode because they're always dropping and always filled with good nuggets like this. And I will be back very soon with another episode. Thank you so much for joining us, Elizabeth. And until I am back, happy baking.